Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us for the show today. Glad that you're here. So, Mark, you are worship leader from Gateway Worship. You're a songwriter. You've also been in the music industry for a long time because you were part of For Him, which actually, let's see if we can get you to. Do you know this song?
We turn the page.
Oh, oh, we read.
What is right and what's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I know that.
You were with For Him for, you guys were doing that for how long? Like 20 years?
Well, we were active, like touring for about 17. And, we met in a group called Truth, which was Truth was a group that had been around for a long time. I think they stayed on the road for 31 years. And it was a group that a lot of college age students would come through and then would go on to either move to Nashville, become a part of the CCM industry, or become worship pastors. And so we were the 4 guys in an 8-member vocal group that had a full band behind them called Truth. And we got approached by Benson Records at the time to form a group called For Him. And so back in 1989, we formed For Him out of Truth. And man, it was before you were born, Matt, before you were born.
Yeah, it's, man, you guys have so many songs. I was looking at your Apple Music page.
Yeah.
So many albums. How many albums did you guys do?
Yeah, I think we probably released somewhere around 14 albums in 17 years. And then there were some other little projects that were like compilations where the record company would put together a best of or a greatest hits or I think one of them was called Simply For Him. And they were on a bunch of compilations. So it's like, you kind of look at the history of it and you go, man, you guys were very, very busy. And I'm like, it wasn't as busy as it looks because the compilations, that's somebody else kind of just putting that together with the songs that we did. But man, just great memories there.
I remember as a teenager, like in the early 2000s, I used to read the magazines. I think there was like a CCM magazine or something where they would always talk about like the Supertones and, all these like night jars of clay, like the 90s, 2000s bands. And I remember For Him was in there all the time.
Yeah, the thing is, For Him, it was interesting because we basically kind of rode the crest of what I think, and I would say, are some of the most significant years in CCM.
Yeah.
Because, it's
Phillips,
like,
all of it.
Well, and you kind of look back and it's like we were the decade of 1990 into 2000, that 10-year span, really saw this massive growth of the contemporary Christian music. And it's because what happened was they all got purchased by large parent companies that were basically just more aware of how to do it. And so they got the music of each artist to the masses. And so it's like, we were owned by a Christian company, Benson was, and then it sold, and then it continued to sell to other secular companies. And so, and then we were part of Word for a while. We were part of Sony, Capitol, all of that. But I had a kind of a front row seat to see it grow, and it was exciting. It was cool.
There is nothing like 90s Christian music. I think that's my favorite period.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that because that's definitely when we were the most active. And it was kind of like, and I agree with you. I mean, I think the thing is I'm definitely a guy that likes to celebrate what's going on now. So I never want to be the guy that says,
stuck in the past. Yeah.
No, I'm not the guy. And so I'm like, because I know that there's so many talented artists. I mean, when you look at what Zach Williams, Lauren Daigle, what Matthew West has continued to do, what Ann Wilson's doing now. And then I've got a lot of friends like Phil Wickham and Josh Baldwin. They're just breaking into the radio market and just having great success. So I'm like, I love what's happening now, but I would have to say there was just something so like new and fresh. And
it was new.
It was new. It was like for the first time, the budgets to make Christian albums actually started matching what people were spending on secular projects, and so
yeah,
the quality grew, and that's the thing that, and I think the thing is, I think songs just, there was more attention and focus on writing songs that sounded more like what radio was playing in the secular marketplace.
yeah.
So the songs actually started sounding a little more like what you would hear if you turned on pop radio.
Yeah, right. I remember just going to shows like, yeah, like, Audio Adrenaline, Newsboys, Third Day, Avalon, like just that time was just special. And it was, like you said, it was like new.
It was new.
There was something unique. So how did you get going with Gateway?
Well, so back in 2006, we talked about just coming off the road and for him. And so we gave it one last tour. And so we decided to basically stop touring. So me and the three guys, we're great friends. We still do one or two things a year, if it comes up, just if it works. But we don't record anymore. We could in the future, if we kicked that thought around lately, but I started doing solo ministry. The guy that was the worship pastor at the time at Gateway, he's still here. He's one of our executive leaders. He grew up a big For Him fan. And so he found out that I led worship and I was doing some solo dates. And so he called and said, "Hey, Mark, would you come and spend a weekend with us?" And this was back in like 2005, before For Him stopped touring. And so I would come about every year to Gateway. So I think my first year was 2005, 2004, maybe even. And so I started frequenting being here. And so then what happened was he would always say, "Man, you're going to be here. Like, you're going to move to Dallas, Fort Worth one day and come on staff at Gateway." And I would always be like, "I don't think my wife will ever leave the Gulf Coast."
Yeah.
We lived down near Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, that real pretty white sand blue area. And so finally in 2012, Thomas and I were talking, and Thomas just said, "Mark, how are you doing?" And I told him, I said, "I feel transition." And so he started talking about, "Hey, what would it be like for you to be an artist in residence at Gateway?" At the time, Carrie Job, Rita Springer were here.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "We've got space, if you want to come, and you can lead on weekends, but you can travel from here." And so in 2013, my wife and I moved here. And it wasn't long before I ended up being asked to be the worship pastor at the main campus.
Yeah.
And then kind of started inheriting a lot of different things. It's a multi-campus church. So through my time here over the last 11 years, Matt, I've held a lot of different titles and responsibilities. And so through it all, I've been a worship pastor here. So,
yeah. I'm just curious, have you, you were doing the touring thing with For Him for so long, kind of living like rock star, dream, artist dream, like music, like getting to do what every musician wants to do.
Yeah.
And is it hard? Have there been times when you're like, "Oh, I wish I was doing that again"? Or you did it for so long? Or was it kind of like, yeah, that's a chapter and it's over?
Really what I do now is I bring artists into Gateway. I help develop the artist that is Gateway Worship. I help, steward our Gateway Worship Espanol, which is a collaborative group of some of the largest artists in Spanish ministry and the Latin world. And so I think now I'm more of a dad to that. So it's like, it feels like where God has me now is really more like helping, artists stay healthy, helping them understand the challenges that the road can bring. And then also trying to pastor them and make sure that they feel like they have a safe place to open up and talk, and so for me, it's kind of like my heart shifted so much like I still, let me say this, Matt, I still use all of what I learned
Sure.
and experienced. And I look back on that time in my life and there's so many great memories.
Yeah.
At the same time, I love so much of what I'm doing now because it's like, I feel like,
Yeah.
I'm able to really kind of take all of the goodie of that and give it away. And so
Sure.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I like that you compared it to that you're kind of a dad now to those people. Because I was actually thinking that it's very natural. It's just a new season. It's almost like actually becoming a real dad.
Yeah.
And that, like, I think back to, I'm a new dad in the past like 5 years.
Yeah.
And my life now is so different than it was when I was in my 20s, when I could just go out to dinner with friends whenever I want. And that was great and fun.
Yeah.
But I'm a dad now. And I still get, what I mean? Like, I'm still the same person, but it's just a different season. And it's not bad.
And I think that there's so many different ways you could go with that, Matt, because as a dad, it's like the things that mattered most to you at one point, they're not much of the priority anymore. The thing that really stands out is like what you're really drawn to, because you're drawn to different things for different reasons. And it's because as a father, there's this mechanism inside of you that wants the best for your kids, and then also want to protect them, but you also want to empower them to be able to grow, and you want to mentor them and raise them up. And so I think for me, it's like I say all the time, both of my daughter and my son are both worship pastors at Gateway. And then my daughter-in-law is one of our main worship leaders that is on every project. And then son-in-law is over all the video content that you see from Gateway Worship. So it's family business. And it's man. And there's no, like, if people said, man, what a great move, you moved there and that way you could, and I'm like, I didn't strategically do any of that. And so many times I look and I'm like, yeah, I have biological children, but I have a whole lot of young worship leaders that I look at and I'm like, I'm just as much like a father to what they're doing, because I really feel like it's like, I mean, scripturally it says, the thing that's going to be lacking is you just don't have many fathers, and it's like, and one of the beautiful things is like today, I was talking earlier today, and so there was an artist that I grew up listening to when I was an older teenager, and his name is Tim Shepard, and he was a large part of CCM back in the 80s. So it's like he's on staff, still a worship pastor. He serves with me in artistry. And so both he and I are kind of the dads even when an artist comes in that may not be a part of Gateway, but they're just a guest, we give them access just to kind of come and hang and spend time and basically just have a place that feels safe.
Right.
And it's not that we have anything figured out anybody else doesn't. It's just like we just make space for it.
Yeah, right. I wanted to bring it up just because I thought that, I've talked to a lot of worship pastors who have either recently kind of left pastoring at churches, like they got fired, or they just got burnt out and left.
Yeah.
Or on the other flip side, they are worship pastors, but have always dreamed of maybe doing what you did for him.
Yeah.
And, I just kind of wondered how you, kind of have balanced those two things, because now you've done both worlds. Like you've handled both.
They're alike, and then they're very different, those two worlds, like, because both, God uses both. God uses the artist that has songs that challenge and encourage people, and God uses the worship pastor whose sole and primary purpose to be on platform is to point people upward. And and so it's like, because I explain it sometimes to worship pastors that talk to me about artistry, and I'm like, as an artist, really, it's like I did this for years. I had a message to sing to people that was an encouraging
Mm-hmm.
sometimes challenging, sometimes, it was kind of a sermon in a song.
Yeah.
And so I would sing that song and then I would draw them to me so that they could get the message that I had.
Yeah.
But worship is really not that at all, because worship is, I've got one hand up and one hand out, and
Yeah.
I'm just the conduit to get them, to draw them to him.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like artistry really is more about me drawing them to me so they can hear my message, because I want them to hear what I'm singing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it. And I see worship as it's kind of a hand up and a hand out.
Yeah.
And it's
right.
not just the intersection of both of those, like people connecting to God. And
Yeah.
and so it still requires a handout. So there's like what I'm saying is, because I've been in worship experiences where whoever was leading worship on the platform was just both, they were lost in their own worship experience,
Right.
and they weren't really leading people.
Yeah.
And it's a delicate balance, like this way, because if it's all that, then it's like, I love that expression.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, people could be left behind in the congregation. And so it's like, so often I'm like, man, I just want to, I'm trying to help worship pastors. Like my artist side helps me say to them,
yeah,
here's what's different, but you do have to reach out to people. Like,
yeah,
but I knew as an artist, I needed to connect to people that were in the audience, just because they're looking to the platform for some kind of
sure. Yeah.
action, So
yeah. Well, it kind of comes back a little bit to what you were talking about with the father thing.
Yeah.
It's like me sitting down with my kids, and if I just sat there and played with Legos on my own and they just watch, that's not, like they want me to play with them.
I've never heard that analogy, Matt.
Like,
I
let's
love
play,
that.
like, let's build a castle together with the Legos instead of you watching me build and that's like fathering.
Yeah.
And
that's such a good, like, I'm going to use that. I love that.
Like, play with your kids. Don't make them watch you.
Yeah. I mean, it's because if you're going to, that's such a true statement. I've never thought of it. I think that's actually so good, that analogy, because it's like, well, I have grandkids, so I could just sit down and I could grab the Legos and I could say, watch me as I build something with kids. That's
let's build together.
Yeah. And they could watch it, but how to help them experience it.
Yeah.
It's like, I have to make sure that I'm like, I'm pulling them to where I'm going to. I see the picture.
I wanted to show this to you. I wanted to show this to you because I, this past Sunday, I was leading worship at our church in our town, and my daughter, Molly, likes to come early with me, and I'll set up a microphone and just let her sing through sound check with me. And she loves it. Like, she just like sings all this. She knows all the words to, like, we were singing like Living Hope there, and she knows every single word to the
That
song.
is so beautiful.
And I think that what is interesting about fathering is that what you do with your children lasts beyond your years. And that's the whole point. It's like what we're pouring into our children, that's going to last way beyond me, when I'm long gone, and hopefully in generations to come from there. And I think that's the hope for worship pastors. If we're fathering our teams right, it's going to have much more ripple effects.
Well, it's like, the thing that I see in that picture is you're like, her little heart and her little mind is dreaming of like what God has for her. It's like you didn't exclude her and say, just watch me, but you involved her and you said, hey, come up. Be a part of this. And it's like, and I'm telling you, there's a picture I have of my daughter. I can't pull it up, but it's when she was 4, and I'm at her school leading worship for chapel, and I'm sitting on the steps, and she's just looking up at me, and it's my favorite picture. I post it every year in a collection of other pictures that are more updated every time she has a birthday. And it's just because I go back to that moment and I'm like, that picture is my most like just my most prized picture of Madison and I. Now she's an incredible worship leader that has this powerful anointing, and she leads all the time at Gateway, and she's pastoring people. But it's like, I firmly believe, like for you, Matt, like if you want your child to follow in your shadow and in your footsteps, and then one day you realize they're no longer in my shadow, I'm in their shadow.
Yeah.
They're just, and it's so true. Like your ceiling is their floor, but that doesn't always happen unless you give them access and you actually are aware that you've got to bring them along.
Yeah.
So
you have to be really intentional.
Really intentional. But I think when you just said that earlier about, because I think even with like, it doesn't stop there, because the congregation, the people that I'm in front of, if I'm leading worship,
right,
I want them to feel like they're in the living room with me and we're having like communion or dinner or fellowship time with God. Yeah, and it's like, right. So it's like, if they feel like they're separated watching me in the living room and it's just they're at a theater watching a movie, it's just not the thing that I feel like. I just feel like there's a disconnect still in that. And so I think there's a way that you can overdo that, but I think that's the reason I say it's a delicate balance, because it's like, I do think that for you to lead people into God's presence, you have to be willing to go there first. And so if you're not going to do that, then you're just going to lead them to you, into whatever expression you have. And so, but I think the one thing that I would say is, on the weekend, it's this, but during the week as I'm preparing, it's this. So it's like, I've got to get alone with God. I know we just had Brooke Lidgertwood here for Gateway Conference, and her and I led together at the conference, and then she's a friend. I love Brooke, sweetheart, and just so anointed. And she just said to me, she said, well, one of the things that she said on platform that I love is, she said, we've been stomping around on platforms and on stages leading worship, and we forgot that we needed to stomp around in our bedroom first. She said, and until we go back there, we're going to never get the full portion of all that God wants to do in the supernatural realm when we're leading worship. And it was just such a great reminder to say, hey, we've got to pull away and make sure that we don't get so busy in doing the worship of, the work of leading people on the weekend, but we have to lead ourselves privately. And I know everybody's thought about that, but it was such a great call, because in that conference were probably 4,000 pastors with a mixture of worship pastors mixed in. Just thought, man, what a great message for them to hear.
For all of them. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So as a worship pastor at Gateway, can you give us a sneak peek into what your week typically looks like? Are you songwriting all the time? Are you in planning center all the time? Are you in Spotify all the time? Meetings? What? Do you even go to work? What do you what do you do
today? This is my office. This is not my home. This is, and I probably lead worship maybe 32 weekends a year right now. Okay. So basically what that means is I'm not my life is not consumed with always just being, a weekend warrior. It's like I do that, but I usually work Monday through Thursday in the office, sometimes on Friday. We do get a Sabbath every week, and the desire from Gateway is that we have at least 2 days where we're not really doing much of anything. So if I'm leading for Saturday and Sunday, because we have some campuses, the majority of our campuses have Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning services. Yeah. So that's a big commitment for the weekend. So if that happens, I try to at least get out of here on Thursday afternoon and then have all day Friday.
That's great.
But my work week is I'm in meetings, planning meetings. I have a lot of one-on-ones with worship leaders that lead here that are younger, because like I said, a part of what I feel like the Lord's really called me to be is a there was a word that was spoken over me. I'm a Samuel pouring into David's now. I'm no longer a David. David is tomorrow's guy. Samuel is today's guy.
Yeah.
And I love that. And so it's like,
Yeah.
I'm, and you think about that, a David needs affirmation, and Samuel is the one that kind of gives him that. And and so anyway, when that word was spoken over me one day, I was like, man, I love that. So I kind of like, okay, well, I can be that. That identity I'll step into.
Yeah. Right.
And
Are you songwriting a lot?
Yeah, I do. And so but at the same time, having been a part of writing for so long, a lot of what I do is to help develop our songwriters. So it's not only in worship or in pastoring ministry, it's also in the craft of songwriting. Because for years, I don't know that I never, writers that have written, you learn so much through the years. And because I spent so many of my days in a writer's room in Nashville, writing with one or two other writers and just helping shape the craft of songwriting in my own life. A big part of what I have to give away and to impart is just what I learned. And it's like, and I've listened to so many people teach on songwriting, Matt, that subject is so subjective. It's like,
right.
It's like, I've heard some of the guys that I looked up to that have written some of the biggest hits in country and pop. And the thing that I've learned even from them is it's like they all have different ways of approaching it.
Yeah.
Now, there are some absolutes, but worship breaks them so many times.
Yeah, like right.
Worship, so.
Do you write alone ever?
I do.
Okay.
Most of what I bring even into a co-write
started alone.
And if I wanted to, I could finish it alone, but it wouldn't be the same song.
Yeah.
That it becomes when I share that space with others. And I love that. Every now and then there's just a song that I'm like, I know where this goes. I know what it needs to do. And, but I found that kind, I remember the first time I was in Nashville for the very first For Him album. And For Him, I was kind of considered the main writer. I mean, one of our other guys wrote some, but he really didn't spend as much time doing it. And so I remember the first time for the very first album, coming into Nashville for 2 weeks and just writing with some of the writers that they would put me with. And I remember going in and thinking, these 3 songs are finished. And then after walking in with those songs, it was like, those songs were so far from finished.
Yeah.
I just learned so much about a better way to approach it. And so I think my journey in life has been me continuing to walk in rooms and just always being willing to learn.
Yeah. And let go of, I think what's hard is actually letting it go.
Yeah, it is. I think, and I've learned, the thing that I say to young writers all the time though, is you let go because you always have the original of what you had. So willing to let the song take the journey.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go in a great direction, you can always say, hey, I don't like where we landed. And I like this better. But if you never let go, then you never experience, like I have so many examples of songs that I thought were complete. And yet when I walked in and allowed other people to speak into the song and then be a part of it.
Yeah.
And the reality is I have so many more of those stories than I do of, no, they've got messed up. There's some stories I've got where the song did not go in the right direction.
Do you do most of your writing there, local in Dallas, or do you go to Nashville a lot to write?
Most here, but what we do is we have such an active songwriting culture. It's like this next week, we're bringing in 3 writers from Nashville, and there's some locally that actually go to Nashville a lot that aren't a part of Gateway that we'll invite to write with us as well. But it's like, one of them is Chris Davenport, who, and he's a great writer, and he's written with us before. And then another is Callie Helligenthal, and right with this. And we brought in Leland, we brought in, every time we have an artist that's a guest at Gateway, we invite them to hang around, and just be a part of a writing experience. So it's like on the last album, I know we had it's like you look through the list of writers and you see a lot of worship artists that stayed around and wrote with us.
Right. Yeah. And you guys have had a busy year. You guys have released 2 albums. Yeah. Completely Abandoned and Crowns Down.
My recommendation to any other church brand that wants to do that, don't.
Yeah. It's one at a time.
One at a time, and one per year. Yeah. If and we slowed down on the back. We didn't slow down really. We're like, we had a song review meeting yesterday, and I think the best thing that we've done, like I do love that we released those 2 albums. Like, man, Completely Abandoned. We released that first of the year in first quarter, and it's just such a beautiful album. And Crowns Down was released this fall, and the reason we released both is because we had 2 nights of worship where we recorded. In the same summer. And so they both were captured within a month. Yeah. And part of it was we had pressed pause on recording and writing here for a few years just because we were adjusting some things. Yeah. And so when we reset and re-engaged, all these songs came. And so we really wanted to, it's kind of like the way we looked at it was a parable of the talents. Yeah. Right. If you bury them and you don't, so we felt like it was our responsibility to steward the songs and to get them out. So we did that pretty quickly. And so now we have another album we're recording next spring and probably be released in the fall of 2024. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. But Completely Abandoned is that is the first. And then we got into Crowns Down, and what a blast Crowns Down was. That song itself with Josh Baldwin was so much fun to do. And then, but it's hard because for us, we put both of those projects together. Yeah. For the consumer that's not at Gateway, obviously they got the information at 2 separate times. So I get that. Yeah. Yeah. They're like it's like A and B or part 1 and part 2.
What's like the number, if there's like one song on these 2 albums that you really hope that worship leaders would maybe play at their church or take a listen and maybe incorporate, what would it be?
That's hard to do because I'm a writer on some of them and I can't say my songs because it would be very
you can do it.
Well, no.
Give us the song that you think, and it can't be Stand in Your Love because everybody knows that song.
Yeah, everybody knows this. Okay. So I would say, Matt, wow, can I give you my top 5?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So I love the song Jesus Is My Healer. Beautiful song. I love the song Who Else? Beautiful song.
Okay.
Who Else Is Powerful? So is Jesus. I love Crowns Down, which I'm part of that. I also love a song called A Million Times. And then I would say, boy, it's tough because there's a song, the title cut from our first project, Completely Abandoned, is beautiful song, great worship song. But there's a hidden gem in that first album that a lot of people don't know about, and it's a song called If We Don't Have You. And it reminds me of the Heart of Worship type moment where it's just so I would say those 6, I said 5. And if I had to pick one, I couldn't because I've led them all and I love them all.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to listen to. I didn't listen to Jesus Is My Healer. Was that it? Was that what it was called?
Yeah, it's a great song. It's like that. Yeah, it's like it was our first single off of Crowns Down.
Okay. All right. We'll check that out.
Yeah, check that out because and honestly, man, like in leading these songs, I mean, they've just gone over like. When you lead a song and you're a worship leader, so you know this, you kind of find out something about that song that you didn't know.
Yeah, right.
There have been times where I've loved songs that I've heard, and when I lead them, I feel like, man, it's just a little bit harder to lead than it is to hear.
Yeah, right.
And so I think I gave you those songs that I mentioned are songs that I've led that I love to lead.
Yeah, that's
The
awesome.
biggest song we've had is a song called I Need You in this new iteration of Gateway Worship. It's like, and it's on the Completely Abandoned album and it's done really well. But, and yeah, so if I stay on with you, I'll keep mentioning songs. Like I said, what I told you was we had a lot of songs that we loved and we had a hard time like putting it in
Yeah.
package. So we made 2 albums and separated them, one first quarter, one fourth quarter.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, I know I've taken a lot of your time this morning, but I had one more question for you. I want to leave this one with you. Let's just pretend a 16-year-old kid comes into your office and sits in that little gray chair back there. And he wants to be a worship leader, wants to be a Dove Award-winning songwriter, and is asking you for advice. What advice would you give him?
You know, I know this sounds like it's probably a pat answer, but I would just say, number one, the thing that I've learned is we really don't own anything. We're just stewarding what God places in our hands. And so it's like, I would just say to that young worship leader, like, just never make it so much about you. Like, if you focus on Jesus and others, and you'll easily love yourself because you'll get so much like fulfillment out of what you get as you focus on Jesus and what you get when you focus on and love others. And I would just say, never be afraid if you're a young worship leader or a young songwriter of celebrating the success or the gifts in others. Like, it never minimizes you. Yeah. So be willing to push others forward, because God will always, for that person, they will always shine, and it's like, and I've just noticed that in my life. It's like having come through those years as an artist when we would have the label just kind of building the narrative and the bio. And it's like, I just realized just personally how that made me think some wrong things. And so what I've learned and what I would say to that young person that wants to be that award-winning writer, or wants to be an artist or a worship leader on a platform, and people, it's like the affection and the admiration of people. You just have to be careful with it, because like the one thing that I've learned is I can't go low enough. I can't walk in enough humility. Like, the more willingness I have to walk and to like humble myself. Yeah. It's like God always takes whatever I offer there, and then he gives me more joy and more fulfillment and more peace. And it's like, I've met so many people that struggle there, and it's like, because their identity, is not healthy as far as how they see themselves. And so because most of the time when people walk in pride, they really walk in insecurity. And so I would just say to that young leader, like, keep your eyes on Jesus and then focus on others and celebrate others. Be that person that just gets so much joy out of lifting others up and pushing others forward. And you will never have to try to push yourself forward.
That's a good word. Mark, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to just encourage worship leaders. And thank you too for just all the songs you've written and the years and years you've poured into worship people.
Man, you know what? It's just so much fun. I love what you guys are doing at Loop Community. I love that you're providing the resource to the church to be able to do the songs. Thank you for all that you've done to resource the kingdom of God with assets that, like, there's so many churches that couldn't do what they do if you guys weren't providing all of what you do to those churches. And we rely on it. We utilize it. Let me also say, I do believe that like worship, you just think of all the impact that you're having, and it's like, you'll never know like Loop Community, you guys will never be able to know how many people that have walked into churches that have been involved in worship sets that Loop Community is a part of, where marriages have been restored, where people that were bound with addiction were set free from that addiction because there was a moment in worship and there was something in an enhancement track that softened the heart. And so there's anointing in that. So I'm just saying, thank you guys for what you do. I'm honored to talk to you. And man, if you're in Dallas, if you're here and you don't come see us and come hang out with us.
Yep. Same to you. Come to Chicago.
You know what? We love. I'll come there. When I come to Chicago, it's just all about food.
Hit me up. Text me. All right. Next time you're in town, I'm going to take you to a pizza place in Chicago that no one knows.
I'm a big Chicago pizza fan.
Yeah. Well, this is a place that the locals know about. This isn't like one of the big like chain. This isn't Giordano's or Luminati's. Although those are great.
Yeah. No. You know what? I go
a special place.
East. I mean, the thing is we have one. We had one in Dallas. I think it shut down. But I'm a big I love that deep dish Chicago pizza. So,
oh man.
I'm in.
All right, Mark. Great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Have a blessed
day. See you later. You too. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Matt McCoy. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Hey, it means so much to us when you let us know what you thought. Write down in the comments what you learned from this episode, anything else that you found encouraging from this episode. Glad you guys are listening to the podcast. Hope to provide to you a lot of helpful content as you lead worship. See you soon.